Good morning, student. Welcome to E-class of St.Xaviers High School, Adipur. Hope you all have seen the part 1 of chapter 5, Separation of Substance. Today, I will teach you the part 2. In part 2, we will learn about sedimentation, decantation, filtration, evaporation, condensation, distillation, solution and saturated solution. Let's start with our first topic of part 2, that is sedimentation. So, what is sedimentation? The settling down of heavy solid particle from the liquid in a mixture of solid and liquid substance. So you can see in this picture, this is a mixture of solid and liquid. After some time, the solid particles will settle down at the bottom and the liquid particles will be in the upper layer. This process of settling, this process is known as sedimentation. Sedimentation method is used when the impurity present in water is heavier than water and is insoluble in water. There's a two conditions where we use the sedimentation method. That is, first the impurity should be heavier than water, and the second is it should be insoluble in water. If the impurity is soluble in water, then we will not use the sedimentation method. We will only use the sedimentation method when the impurity is heavier than water and is insoluble in water. For example, mixture of stone and water. You can see in this image, water containing insoluble impurities. After some time, insoluble impurity will settle down at the bottom and the clear water is visible at the upper layer. Okay, this process is known as sedimentation. This insoluble impurities settling down at the bottom, this method is known as sedimentation method. Now the next method is decantation. Decantation is a process for the separation of mixture by removing a layer of liquid from the top after the heavier component of the mixture settled down. After sedimentation, we will do the decantation. When the impurities settle down at the bottom, so what we will do, we will remove the upper layer of liquid. That process is known as decantation. Now you can see in this process that we will the heavier component settle down at the bottom. Now what we are doing, we are removing the liquid part in another beaker, so without disturbing the undissolved impurities. That method is known as decantation. Only heavy insoluble impurity can be removed by this method. In the same condition, in decantation also the heavy impurity and it should be undissolved in water. For example, cream accelerate to the top of the milk. Along the separation of milk and cream, we always remove the cream from the milk and to separate the water from buttermilk. You always seen in your home when you are drinking the buttermilk. When you kept the buttermilk for some time, what you see in the upper layer there's some water and in the bottom there is some buttermilk. So what you will do, if you want the pure buttermilk, what you will do, you will remove the upper layer of water. So that process, that method is known as decantation. Now, decantation of liquid. We can use the decantation to separate the two liquids with different density. As I also told you, what is density? Density means heavier, such as oil and water. You can see this is a mixture of oil and water. Oil is heavier than water, so oil will be in upper layer and water will be in bottom. So we can easily remove the water from the oil and oil is in the upper layer. Okay, this method is known as decantation. Decantation of sediment, we can also separate a liquid from heavy sediment that is sink in the bottom of the container. For example, stones and water. You can see this is a sand and water. We have already done the sedimentation method. Now what we will do? We will do the decantation method. That is, clear water is another beaker and the sand is in another beaker. Now I will show you video. See this video. You will get the better understanding about the sedimentation and decantation. You can see sedimentation is the process of separation of insoluble liquid from liquid when the solids are heavier than. See that we can mix the mud in a water. Now we will allow to stand for some time. The solid will settle down and liquid will be in the upper layer. Now we will remove the top layer without disturbing the settled solid. We can separate the liquid from solids. You can see this, the bottom, there is some solid impurities. This is known as sediment and this is known as clear water. Now what we are doing? Decantation. Now we are removing the clear water of a liquid without disturbing the settled solid. That process is known as decantation. I hope from this video you get the clear about the decantation and the sedimentation method. Now we will move to the next method, that is filtration. Filtration you easily seen in your home when your mother put some water in a pot. So what she do? She put some piece of cloth above the pot. So it means what she is doing? She is doing filtration. And you also see that when the mother separate the tea from the tea leaves. That is, now you can see filtration is a method for separating an insoluble solid from a liquid by a filter paper or a piece of cloth. In laboratories for filtration, we use the filter paper, and in home for use a piece of cloth. Both light and heavy insoluble solid impurities. In the filtration method, also the impurity should be insoluble. Can be separated from liquid by this method. Water is cleaned by this process. In our homes, to filter the water, we use the filtration method. And we also remove the tea leaves are removed from tea by filtration. Now the next method is evaporation. Evaporation is a process in which liquid gets converted into its vapor. It means whenever liquid gets converted into vapor, that process is known as evaporation. Evaporation can be used to separate a solid dissolved in liquid. Evaporation method is used whenever the solid dissolved in water. In filtration, decantation, sedimentation, the solid is not dissolving in water. But in evaporation, whenever the solid dissolved in liquid, that time we use the evaporation method. Clear? In evaporation, whenever the solid dissolve in liquid, that time we will use the evaporation method. Evaporation is responsible for the conversion of sea water into clouds. That means sea water into clouds can be converted by the evaporation method. And the process of evaporation is also used to obtain salt from seawater. In a seawater, in oceanic water, there is too much salt. So to get the salt from seawater or oceanic water, what we will use? We will use the evaporation method. Now the question arises, how the salt obtained from seawater? So the process of evaporation is used to obtain salt from seawater. The first question clear, which method we will use? We will use the evaporation. Now we will see the process. Seawater is allowed to stand in a shallow pit. Shallow pit means, or in a bowl you can say. Now water get heated by sunlight. We can heat in sunlight, or we can also heat in a gas in any material which give us the heat to the seawater. Now slowly turns into the vapor through evaporation. Slowly the seawater will be converted into vapor through the evaporation. In a few days, the water evaporates completely, leaving behind the solid salt. It means the water will evaporate and the solid salt will be leaving behind. Now the common salt is then obtained from this mixture by further purification. It means we will get the salt from the seawater by the process of evaporation. Again, I am explaining you. First of all, we will put the seawater in sunlight. Slowly, slowly, it will turns into the vapor. After evaporating water, it will leave the solid particle in the shallow pits. So that solid is known as common salt. Now this next method is condensation. The process of conversion of water vapor into liquid form is called condensation. Now the vapor again converted into liquid, that process is known as condensation. Evaporation means liquid is converting into vapors and vapor again converted into liquid, that method is known as condensation. Condensation is responsible for the conversion of clouds to water. Again, in evaporation, water is forming the clouds. Now clouds again get converted into water through the condensation method. You can see in this image. In this pot that we are giving heat, it converted into the vapors. When these vapors cool down, you can see here I put some ices. When we will put some ice, the water vapor becomes cooled down. After cooling, what will happen? This vapor again converted into liquid. This method is known as condensation. Whenever the vapors cool down, it converted into liquid. This process is known as condensation. Now, dew on the grass in the morning, cold glass of liquid, fog on the inside of the car window. These are all the example of condensation. Or you obviously see that when you put some water on a glass, you can see in the outer layer of the glass there's some drops of water. It means this process is known as condensation. Now the next method is distillation. Distillation method is used to obtain pure water from seawater. From seawater, we want the pure water. That process is known as distillation. Distillation method is used to obtain the pure water. It means to get the pure water. It means we can easily use that water. We cannot use the seawater because seawater contains too much salt. So we cannot directly use the seawater to get the to make the water usable. So how we will make that seawater usable? By the method of distillation. You can see. Seawater, how we will do the distillation? First of all, seawater is boiled in a closed container and steam is obtained. Now we can see here, this is a salt water or a seawater. Salt water means a mixture of salt and water, and seawater is also a mixture of salt and water. So first of all, we will put the salt water in a closed container. So when we will give the heat, when we will boil it, the steam is released. You can see here, this is a steam. Now the vapor thus obtained is passed through a condenser tube. This is a condenser tube. This is a condenser tube. Now where it condensed and converted into water again. Slowly this vapors goes into the condenser tube. But in a condenser tube, these vapors will cool down and it converted into the water again. Now the water obtained at the other end. In this another beaker, we get the water through the condenser tube. This water is known as distilled water. This is tasteless water. We can use it for another methods, but we cannot use it for drinking water. Be careful. Distilled water we will not use for drinking purpose. We use for another process, for washing, cleaning, but we will not drink the distilled water. Distilled water is a tasteless water. Okay, and this method is called distillation. Now the next topic is solution. A solution is a type of homogeneous mixture that is made up of two or more substances. In a solution, there is always two substances. Solution has also 2 points, that is first is solute and solvent. Listen here, be careful. Solution is a mixture of two or more substances. Whenever two or more substances combine together, they form the solution. It consists of two parts, solute and solvent. Now, what is solute? Solute is a minority part of the solution, or this is the part that is dissolved. Listen here carefully. Solute is a minority part. It means the in salt water, for example, you can see get the clear understanding from the example. In salt water, the solute is the salt. When we want to make a salt water, what we will do? We will put some salt. So that salt is known as solute. Okay. And what is solvent? Solvent is a majority part of the solution. What is a majority part? Solvent is a majority part. In a salt water, the solvent is water. When you want to prepare the mixture of salt water, you will put some salt and you will put some water. So quantity of salt is very less than water. So salt is solute and water is solvent. These are known as solute and solvent. In any solution, which when we put in a very less quantity, that is known as solute, and the substance which we put in large quantity, that is known as solvent. What is saturated solution? So a saturated solution is the one in which no more solute can dissolve further at the given temperature. Saturated solution means when the solute will not dissolve in a water. In any liquid, whenever the substance will not dissolve or solute cannot dissolve, that is known as saturated solution. You can see here I have put some solute. Slowly the some are dissolved, but still some solute will remain in the liquid. That is known as the saturated solution. Thank you. Now read the chapter carefully.